Hey, hi everybody. This Parsha is Parshas Omer. And Parshas Omer is a very, every Parsha is important, but there are many mitzvahs in Parshas Omer. It starts off with Kohanim, who can Kohanim marry, who they can't marry. The laws of a Kohen not coming in contact with a dead body. Very important halachos that still apply today. But Parshas Omer is also the Parsha of the Torah that goes through all of the holidays. It is the main Parsha in the Torah that deals with all the Yomim Tovim, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and the like. And as a result, it is the source for the mitzvah that we're doing these days, and that is the mitzvah of counting the Omer. Right? Where does the Torah say there's a mitzvah called Sfiras HaOmer? It is in Parshas Omer, where right after it talks about Pesach, it says, Usfartem lachem, you shall count mimacharas haShabbos, the day after Shabbos. Now again, remember how the Chachamim interpret the verse, the day after Shabbos. The Sadducees, who didn't believe in the oral law and they read the Torah literally, they say Shabbos meant Saturday. And as a result, they always began counting the Omer on a Sunday, the day after Shabbos. That is not our tradition. Our tradition is that Shabbos is another word for the holiday of Pesach, because it's also Shabbos. You refrain from doing different types of work. So if Shabbos means Pesach, in other words, the first day of Pesach, Mimacharas HaShabbos, the day after Shabbos always means the second day of Pesach. And that's how we paskin, that we start counting the Omer the second day, or the second night of Pesach. So you shall count on the second night of Pesach, we'll say, which is the day that you bring the Omer. The Omer is a barley offering. Omer is really a volume measurement. It's the volume of 43 1/5 eggs. That's the amount of barley that was brought. So really, if you think about it, the phrase counting the Omer actually doesn't make any sense. You're not counting Omer is a measure, a bushel. So you're not counting the Omer, you are counting from the Omer. The Omer was a korban that was brought on the second day of Pesach, comprising barley flour. So what happened in the course of time is this. Omer, the original meaning of Omer was the barley measure that you brought on the second day of Pesach, and you start counting from that point. Eventually, Omer became a designated name for a period of time, the Omer. Okay, so words change. In the Chumash, when the Chumash says the Omer, it's referring to the korban. When we say the Omer, we are referring to a period of time. Okay, but be it as it may, I want to talk a little bit about what is this mitzvah of counting the Omer. What is the purpose of counting the Omer? So we know that Pesach is the holiday of freedom, liberation. We call it in our davening, Zaman Cherusenu, the season of our freedom. Shavuos is the season of God giving us the Torah. What counting the Omer does is, counting the Omer creates a linkage, a connection between freedom and Torah, as if to say, it's not really two holidays. It's not that we have a holiday of freedom and a holiday of Torah, but rather it goes the other way. The purpose of freedom is that we should accept God's Torah. And the Omer is a linkage. In fact, Ramban actually writes that the period of the Omer, the 49 days of the Omer, could be seen as one long Chol HaMoed. It's as if to say, Pesach and Shavuos are one holiday. And the Chol HaMoed of that holiday are the 49 days of the Omer, which is an interesting idea, because Pesach has its own Chol HaMoed within Pesach, obviously, but the Ramban says Sfiras HaOmer is a long Chol HaMoed, because Pesach and Shavuos are not separate holidays. It is Shavuos that gives meaning to Pesach. This is an important idea. You know, people say, oh, the purpose of my life is to be free. Freedom does not give you a purpose. Freedom, at best, is an enabler. When I am free from outside oppression, I can then do something with my life. But freedom itself does not give you a purpose. It does not tell you what you do with your freedom. You can't say the purpose of my life is to be free. Erich Fromm, who happened to be Jewish, not observant in any way, who was a disciple of Sigmund Freud, who also happened to be Jewish and not observant, once remarked that we make a very big mistake when we define freedom as freedom from something. Freedom has to be freedom towards something. Freedom from something is just absence of restriction. Freedom towards something says your freedom is oriented towards a goal. And that's exactly what counting the Omer is. We are counting from freedom towards a goal of our freedom, which was Matan Torah. The Chazal made this point very beautifully in a very direct way. They point out that the korban that is brought, the grain offering that is brought on Pesach, which of course is the korban of the Omer, was barley flour. Now barley, at least before the invention of cholent, was primarily for animals. Barley was typically animal fodder. On Shavuos, the korban that is brought was wheat. Now wheat was primarily for human consumption. So what are Chazal telling us? Or what is the Torah telling us? On Pesach, where all you have is freedom, it's animal freedom, the freedom of the wild animal. On Shavuos, animal liberation gets transformed into human dignity. We think freedom is I can do whatever I want, but the truth is a wild animal can do whatever it wants. True freedom, actually, exercising choice, is when I could decide to do what I don't want to do because it's the better thing to do. Now, the opposite of when people ask, what is Bechira? Right, Bechira is free will. Right, probably the favorite topic in our Sameach. Every year, we're always talking about free will. So what's free will? Oh, God gave me the power to do whatever I want to do. Well, no. Animals can do whatever they want to do. Free will is the power to override. I want to do something. I want to have whatever. I want to have non-kosher food. I want to have whatever sexual relations with whoever I want. Bechira is my capacity to override my animal instincts and not do what I want to do because not doing it is the right decision, or the other way around. Bechira is to decide to do something that I'd rather not do right now, like learn or daven, because that's the right decision. The true test of Bechira is not that you do what you want, but you have the capacity to do what is right, to override the animal within us. And that is why Pesach and Shavuos have to be connected. Because without a Torah, not only is your freedom worthless, your freedom becomes destructive. It's a freedom without meaning, a freedom without structure, a freedom without any type of end result that creates goodness and nobility. There was an Indian poet, from the country India. He won the Nobel Prize in the 1920s for literature, Tagore, Tagore. He certainly was not Jewish, and he wasn't talking about Judaism. I don't even know if he knew Jews. I have no idea. But he once gave a beautiful metaphor about a human soul that's worthwhile to think about. He said a human soul is like a violin string. In that violin string is the capacity to make beautiful music. Now imagine if you have a violin string that's just a loose string. I just have a string. It's on the kitchen table. What sound will I be able to get out of a string that's totally free? Nothing at all. I had a string. I hit the string, I rub the string, nothing happens. So what do I have to do in order to get music from the violin string? I have to tie the string down over the bow of the instrument. Or no, it's not the bridge, over the bridge of the instrument. Right? When the string is tied over the bridge. Now I can plunk it. I can run my bow over it. In other words, the paradox is the string is able to express its music only when it's tied down. A human soul can express its music, its beauty, only when it submits to something greater than itself. Then it becomes free. Then it becomes liberated. The paradox of being tied down as a revelation of the true inner freedom that is within a person. Right? That's as Chazal say, you're going from barley to wheat. You know, think about this even outside of Judaism. You sometimes look at abstract artists. You look at Picasso, right? Traditional representational art, drew images of people or trees or whatever it is. And Cubism or these other modern movements, they just have these different shapes. And sometimes these paintings look, not Picasso per se, but some of the modern artists, it looks like they just kicked a paint can over some canvas. So a 3-year-old says, hey, I can do that. A 3-year-old throws the paint over everything. Or let's say you hear a jazz improv, a riff. The musician just goes crazy with all sorts of things. And you say, hey, I'm learning to play a trombone or I'm learning to play a piano. And I got to spend 3 hours doing scales. Scales are boring. Same thing over and over and over and over and over again. I want to be creative. I want to improvise. But you know something? People like Picasso or people like, John Coltrane, whoever these jazz people are, they spend, Picasso spent hours and hours and hours learning how to draw regular art. And the jazz musicians spent hours and hours playing scales. Meaning it's only when you connect yourself to the discipline are you then able to be creative and open. Judaism is very much the same way, lahavdil. On one hand, you submit yourself to mitzvahs, to obligations, to the rituals. And you got to do them again and again and again. And sometimes they're not so exciting, and sometimes they're not always going to inspire us. But eventually, as you connect to God's will, you then get freed, you then get liberated. You then get able to express your creativity and your individuality at a much higher level. But without that submission to God, you are no better than the 3-year-old who wants to do Picasso stuff or whatever it would be, or bang on the piano. Right? So there is a concept that freedom requires submission. And that is the lesson of the counting of the Omer. Pesach and Shavuos are not two different holidays. Rather, it is Shavuos, submission to Hashem, that gives meaning and purpose to Pesach. So in this connection, I want to go back a little bit and mention something about Pesach that I think connects to this very nicely. And that is, at the Seder, Ashkenazim have a custom, and many Sfaradim do not have the custom, but most Ashkenazim have the custom, that after you eat the mandatory foods, the matzah, the maror, the sandwich, the korach sandwich, so now you're finally ready for the meal if you're still hungry. So the first thing that they serve at the meal proper is a hard-boiled egg. Now this is not, I know, particularly if you have any relatives who are from Eastern Europe, like Poland or Russia, and they're not so knowledgeable. They look at the egg like it's the most important mitzvah d'oraisa, more important than the matzah. Where's the egg? Now, okay, it's not obligatory. It is not a chiyuv to eat the egg, but it is a minhag, and it's a minhag that is brought down, and there are reasons for the minhag. And one explanation is that the egg is the food you give a mourner after a funeral. When a person lost a relative, and they come home to the Shiva house, and we feed them, we bring them food. This is actually very important. The first meal that a mourner eats should not be, he should not go into the kitchen and get his own food. We bring food to him. That's an absolute halacha, that we have to feed the mourner. But the very first thing we feed the mourner is a hard-boiled egg. And you'll also remember we eat the hard-boiled egg at the last meal before the 9th of Av. The hard-boiled egg is connected to a mourning ritual, mourning avelus, mourning. And the reason is because the egg is oval, and oval represents a wheel, and we kind of tell the person, hey, there are bad times in life, but life is like a wheel. So the wheel turns, and the bad times can become good times. That's why lentils are also good. Lentils, chickpeas, anything that is round or oval is considered to be the food of a mourner because it gives him comfort. So
round fruits too?
Didn't hear you?
Round fruits as well then?
Ground fruit?
Round fruits.
Oh, round, yeah. Although apples, I don't know why an apple wouldn't be good, but we tend to give smaller ovals. But yeah, a fruit would be good also. So the question is, why do I give mourners food at the Seder? The Seder is a happy occasion. Answer, because according to the Jewish calendar, the first night and day of Pesach will be the same night and day of the 9th of Av later in the summer. So this year, right, the first day of Pesach was Monday night, Tuesday. The 9th of Av is going to be Monday night, Tuesday. So, at the Seder, where we think about the Korban Pesach, and we realize we don't have the Korban Pesach, and we think about the 9th of Av that commemorates the Korban Beis HaMikdash, we're saddened. And we need the comfort of the hard-boiled egg. So according to that, the hard-boiled egg is a nichum avelim. It is the comforting of a mourner as we contemplate the 9th of Av and the fact that we don't have the Korban Pesach. Right? This is a reason that is brought down. Now, in Judaism, there are no coincidences. Why did God arrange the calendar so that the day of the week of the destruction of the temple will be the same day of the week as the Passover Seder? Right? Pesach Seder, liberation, joy, happiness. Why would that be the day of Tisha B'Av? So here is my speculation. Don't ask me for the source. I don't have any source. But my speculation is this. The first day of Pesach is the only day which is not linked to the holiday of Shavuos. Why is that so? Because we don't start counting the Omer till day 2. So we could actually say day 1, including the first Seder, is freedom without Torah. Starting day 2, we have freedom with Torah because we're counting towards Shavuos. So perhaps the lesson is this. When you have freedom and it's not connected to Torah, that will inevitably lead to Tisha B'Av. That will inevitably lead to destruction and estrangement and bad things. You could even say, in other words, that the egg at the first Seder is a substitution for not counting the Omer at the first Seder, in the sense that it reminds me that when freedom is not connected to Torah, there will be destructions, right? So that's one explanation for the egg. I'll give you another explanation, which leads to the same conclusion, but gets there in a different way, from the Hasidic Rebbe, the Ishbitzer. The Ishbitzer Rebbe was the 19th century. He was the Rebbe of Rav Tzadok. And the Ishbitzer was a very, very deep thinker, but very bekitzer. His observations are very short, unlike Rav Tzadok, whose Torah is much longer. And those of you who follow Rav Shlomo Carlebach in his speeches know that Rav Carlebach always drew on the Ishbitzer. In fact, he kind of popularized the Ishbitzer among many segments who had never even heard of him before. The Ishbitzer points out that birds give birth very differently than mammals. Mammals, humans, cows, dogs, cats, give birth to live offspring, right? A mammal gives birth to a baby. A bird gives birth in 2 stages. The first stage is it lays an egg that had been fertilized. The second stage is, at some point, the egg hatches. The bird that's in the egg comes out of the egg. So there's a double birth. There is the laying of the egg, and there is the hatching of the egg. Says the Ishbitzer, the Jewish people have 2 stages in our birth. We were not born as a nation upon the Exodus itself, because the Exodus is like the laying of the egg. The hatching of the egg, the completion of our birth, is Matan Torah. So the conclusion is the same, that the hard-boiled egg reminds me, hey, I'm not yet born, meaning the first stage in my birth has taken place. But until Shavuos, my birth is not complete. So that's another way of looking at the image of the egg. But be it as it may, let's go back to a more basic question. If the purpose of the counting of the Omer is we want to connect the idea of freedom to the idea of Torah, then why don't I start the first day? Why don't I start the counting of the Omer until the second day? I mean, after all, I want to connect freedom and Torah. So start first night. Which would mean, in other words, Sfira would be 1 day longer. Okay, let the Torah set it up. Let the Torah say, you shall count 50 days and then have Shavuos, instead of 49 days and then have Shavuos. Right? It's a good question. So, the Alter Rebbe, in the not in the Tanya, but in his Sefer HaChumash, the Likutei Torah, says the following idea. But let me be makdem it with a very interesting observation that Rav Nachman of Breslov says in the name of his great-grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov. Right? Rav Nachman of Breslov is a direct descendant of the Baal Shem Tov. And the question was raised, why is it, and maybe this will resonate with you, why is it that when a person first comes to Yiddishkeit, you first get exposed to Judaism, everything is so exciting, everything is so sweet, everything is so geschmack, every Shabbos is beautiful, every benching is great, every davening is wonderful. Baruch Hashem, right? Shabbos Kodesh. And then as you get more and more habituated, it's no longer so exciting anymore. You might lose your excitement, you lose your passion, you lose your geschmack. In fact, there's all sorts of jokes. Maybe they're bad jokes, but there's a ring of truth in them. Right? Everyone says, oh, the goal of being a Baal Tshuva is to be integrated in the Frum community. That people shouldn't look at me and say, oh, I know you weren't born religious. Right? We want to be fully integrated. So people say, when does a Baal Tshuva become fully integrated as a regular Frum person? So the answer is when he talks during davening, when he wants to go to sleep Friday night instead of a Dvar Torah. In other words, what's the direction of those jokes? Oh, you're a regular Frum person when Judaism is no longer so important to you. Ay, vez mir. That's a pretty bad deal. Because here, I work and I want to serve Hashem and it's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And that my whole life is a downward curve. Downhill from here. That's not a very optimistic, hopeful view of life. And it doesn't even make sense. Now, I know we could explain it. Well, listen, that's the nature of habits. You do something over and over and over again, so after a while it gets less interesting to you. I get that by some things. But that can't be true for Torah and mitzvahs. Because Torah and mitzvahs are supposed to connect you to God. So the more I do, the more connected I am. How could it be that the more mitzvahs I do, the less connected I feel? See, that makes no sense. Mitzvahs are to connect me to God. This was a kasha the Baal Shem Tov asked. So even almost 300 years ago, this was a problem. How come the more I do, the less I feel? What's going on? So listen to the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov gave a wonderful mashal. Let's imagine a baby that's learning to walk. So initially the baby is very wobbly, doesn't really have his balance. So the parents are holding the baby's shoulders. And the baby takes a step, and takes another step, and takes another step. And then at some point, the parents feel the baby is ready, and they let go of the baby's shoulders. Now, as soon as they let go of the baby's shoulders, what is immediately going to happen is the baby's going to fall. Plop, plop, plop. Now, what's quite amazing is, this is another talk for another time, no matter how many times the baby falls, he'll get up again. That's an amazing thing. If you think about the resilience that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put into the human being. You know, we as adults, we have the old saying, if at first you don't succeed, try again. But l'maisa, most of the time, we try something, it doesn't work, we just give up. But that's an acquired deficit. The nature of a human being is not to give up. And you see this from a baby, you see this from a child. I remember when my son began to crawl before he was walking. So it was such a strain, even crawling. Crawling is not easy. In fact, I think they once tested, there was a famous Olympic athlete, Jim Thorpe. It was a publicity stunt, I think, from the 1930s. And they wanted Jim Thorpe to follow a baby around, crawl around you. For 2 hours or so. And Jim Thorpe was an Olympic athlete, was totally exhausted following the babies moving around and this and that. He couldn't do it. The baby's doing it all day. He couldn't do it for 2 hours. So I remember when my son began crawling, it was so excruciating. He was on his stomach. And I'm thinking to myself, who's making you do this? Nobody's telling you to do this. Why are you doing it if it's so hard? But there's something in the human being that says, I'm going to do this. And when it comes to walking, no matter how many times the kid falls down, he's going to get up again. Amazing thing. This is what Hashem put into your neshama. Don't give up. If later in life we give up, we picked it up somewhere. Negative messages or whatever it is. It's not the way we were made. We were not made to give up. Think about that. Think about what you can learn from a baby. But still, if the baby could verbalize his or her thoughts, the baby might think, how come 5 minutes ago walking was so easy and now it's so hard? Am I regressing? But what's the answer? Hey, kid, it was so easy because mom and dad were holding you up. They were your crutch. But now you're strong enough and you're good enough and you're skilled enough and you're capable enough that we can let go so you'll do it on your own. We're here to protect you that you don't hurt yourself. But do it on your own. But without the crutch, I'm going to fall for a while. Says the Baal Shem Tov. Listen to this mashal. Wow. The Baal Shem Tov says, on Pesach, when a person first comes to tshuva, they're very, very far from God. They're very far from God. They don't have the mitzvahs. They don't have the Torah learning. So God carries them. What brings you to tshuva is Hashem is carrying you and showing you a place that's beyond you. So at that point, everything's beautiful, everything's radiant, everything's gewaldic. At some point, God says to you, okay, I've shown you what you could become. Now I'm letting go. I'll still be here. I'm letting go and see if you can reach me on your own. So says the Baal Shem Tov an amazing thing. So when a person initially had so much enthusiasm and so much passion, and now they lose it, that's not a regression. That's a vote of confidence. God is saying, I was carrying you through this process. Now I'm going to let go so you can internalize it and you can make it your own. See the Baal Shem Tov's insight? And therefore, the yeridos that I face in life is God's vote of confidence in me that I'm ready to internalize it on my own. This is, Rav Nachman of Breslov brings this in the name of the Baal Shem Tov. Now, based on this, we can understand the difference between Pesach and Shavuos. Pesach, God showed us miracles and light and ruchnius that were really way beyond our ability. Remember, in Mitzrayim, the Jewish people who survived, 4/5 died, but the Jewish people who survived were on the 49th level of impurity. We were not that righteous. And Chazal say even the lowly maidservants saw at the Yam Suf revelations of the Shekhinah that the prophet Yechezkel didn't even see when he saw God's Kisei HaKavod. So Pesach represents the notion of God lifting you up as high as you could possibly go, showing you things beyond the level that you earned. Pesach represents God carrying me and showing me the wonders of a spiritual universe. But that's what God gave me. I didn't earn it. I didn't work on it. So afterwards, God says, now that I showed you what you could become, I'm putting you on the ground. And I'm telling you, start the journey to become what I showed you you're able to become. And that journey is not going to be sudden. Unlike Pesach, which is the sudden revelation of Makos and Yam Suf, Shavuos is a laborious step-by-step process, a journey of 49 days. I go forward a little bit at a time. I journey. I walk. You see? So that is why the Balatanya says, we count the Omer the day after the first day of Pesach, because it's a new level. Pesach are the freebies that God gives you. But then there's a tomorrow, a next step, a different avodah. It's no longer what God gives you. It's what you give back to God by becoming the person that God showed you you're capable of becoming. See, it's a beautiful idea. And therefore, Pesach represents God's gift of holy revelation. Omer represents our working and striving to internalize within our personalities that which God showed us on Pesach. And therefore it begins the next day because it's a new chapter. It's no longer the chapter of passively receiving gifts from God. It is the process of earning it by work and by effort and the like. In fact, to digress, just to give you an analogy very far afield, you know, people sometimes say when they've taken psychedelic drugs that they've experienced very deep spiritual experiences. Okay, I don't want to get into all of that. Sounds like some people are familiar with that. Okay, no questions asked. So people ask legitimately, So why shouldn't I incorporate that in my Judaism? I mean, spiritual, I sense God. So I'm putting aside health concerns. I'm not addressing that issue. But one of the issues is that the spirituality that you get through drugs is simply a freebie. It's not something you worked on. It's not something you earned. It's just a shortcut. And spirituality via shortcuts are ultimately not that meaningful. It is only the ruchnius that you get through work and effort that are significant. And that's what the counting of the Omer represents. So Pesach, Hashem showed us what we could become. And Omer, culminating in Shavuos, is God telling us, I've shown you what you could be, now you got to become it by your effort. I'm still here to help you, but I'm letting go a little bit. So you internalize that level on your own. So I wish you all a wonderful Shabbos, and you take care.
Thank you for listening to this Omer production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.